next day. And as you can probably see, I'm further experimenting with positions, layouts, where the cushions are, where the lights are, what shirt I've got on, all that sort of thing. I'm not convinced that it's going to make the slightest bit of difference, but at least I'm having a go at seeing how things work. I discovered some new things over the last few hours. One is that I'm a baby boomer, and that came as a bit of a surprise because I don't think the word baby particularly fits in with 70 years old. But the baby boomers, people of my age, people born between the end of the Second World War, I suppose, and the 50s, I think, late 50s, early 60s, they were known as the baby boomers because there was a huge uptick in births after the Second World War. And I feel a bit odd about being a baby boomer, but I think it's better than being Gen X or Gen Z or Z or whatever else these things are. So that was a bit of a surprise to learn that. I was also quite surprised to learn, procrastinating again as I was on YouTube, that I'm a polymath, a word which I may have used earlier, which means I'm probably not really an expert on anything at all. I think we've all got a contribution to make, and as someone said the other day there, if you can get somebody from 3 out of 10 to 5 out of 10 in their area of expertise, then, or 7 out of 10 to 8 out of 10, then that doesn't mean to say you have to be a 10 to do that. It just means that you've got a little bit more experience and perhaps a little bit more to pass on. And I made some notes which I'm probably going to have to refer to, but that's okay as well. Yeah, a casual authority. I think that's what I fancy myself as. This grandpa method of vlogging seems to be the way forward, and I quite like the idea of being able to pass on experience. I've got a couple of people here who, bizarrely, from my point of view at least, consider me to be some kind of mentor. Yes, I've been able to teach them things, and yes, I've been able to help them learn from my mistakes, I suppose, which is quite a good thing in its own right. But I wouldn't have considered myself to be an authority particularly on anything. There's lots of things that I do. I can give general advice on things like, well, just making a list, cooking and growing tomatoes and making chutney. English language, I've got a qualification in teaching English as a foreign language, so I can do a bit of that. Driving on and off road, especially on tarmac, especially on sand, quite good at that. I'm pretty good at model car restoration. I'm not an expert on anything, and I'm not sure that. I always remember in my early days as a kid, with two channels on the television in Scotland where I was brought up. One was the BBC, which of course everybody watched, and the other one was Scottish television. And Scottish television had advertisements, which my father didn't approve of. He thought they were all nonsense, and it was filler, and I think he thought there was something sinister perhaps going on about, why were we being advertised to. But in those days, with there only being two channels, it was quite easy to swing from one channel to the other and get two expert opinions. And with there only being two channels, and therefore only two experts, you had a reasonable chance of actually dealing with someone who was an expert, because there were only two outlets for them, and so they'd be easier to find. Nowadays, with hundreds of channels on televisions and on YouTube and on Netflix and whatever else you can think of, there seem to be experts in their multiples sometimes on the same programme. and so is billed as an expert, and this person is billed as an expert, and so on and so forth. And you are just bombarded by so-called expertise, when in fact some of it is pretty thin. So I don't consider myself to be an expert on anything, because even I know from my watching of YouTube and the procrastination efforts that I have gone through to get me this far, there are a lot of people who are far more expert in far more fields than I will ever be able to be an expert in. But it doesn't change the fact that at 70 years old, you have a chunk of experience that other people don't have. And whilst it may not be relevant to a particular problem, if there is something that someone thinks you can shed some light on, or can show you how they made the mistake, or can point out a pitfall that you perhaps haven't seen, even if you don't take the advice, it's always better to have some tucked up your sleeve. So I wouldn't think of being an agony aunt, as it were, but I quite like the idea of, what was the expression that we had here? Let me just see again. It's in my notes. A casual authority. Yes, a casual authority. I quite like that. It's taken me quite a while to get here. Not the casual authority bit, because, as my friends will tell you, I've usually got some kind of opinion or other. But there's a guy that I watch on YouTube called Kevin Colby, and he's one of these guys that just encourages people who are over 40 to, to pass stuff on. And I think it might be because there's an awful lot of people who are under 40 don't read, don't listen. When I say listen, I mean to radio. Have learned the curious skill or lack of skill in a conversation to ask questions, and then spend the time that you're supposed to be listening to the answers, composing your next question. And an awful lot of television seems to me to be like that. I remember there was a film, I think it was, now what would it have been in the bookcase? The Jack Reacher novels, that's what it was. I'll remember the name later. The Jack Reacher novels. And then there was an actor in America who was cast as Jack Reacher. And it was ridiculous. I mean, the film may have been very good, but it was completely ridiculous to have a 5'6" actor who was built like a stick insect represent someone who was 6'5", 200 pounds, and built like a wrestler, which is the picture that we had all painted because we had read the books, and that was how the author had described him. So the film was nonsensical from almost the opening sequence, purely and simply because the picture was wrong. And I think that if people would read more and listen more to radio, they would learn to paint their own pictures rather than believe the pictures that are being fired into you from every conceivable channel. We see it in politics. I don't really intend to get into politics. I don't know enough about it, and what I do know about it, I don't like. But you do see it in politics. A picture is painted by someone else. So a clip of video will be taken, and a section will be taken out that's not actually relevant to the story, and that will be twisted round. And I think that's wrong. And I think people fall for it because they don't do enough reading, and they don't do enough listening to the point of painting your own picture with what you hear. And that's one of my pet hates. That really annoys me. So I'll probably have that as a discussion point at some time. Um, I've got hobbies and passions, and I've got experience with careers and business and so on. But to go back to Kevin Colby, sorry, Kevin, I just got completely sidetracked as usual. His encouragement has been just get on with it. I know because he's told me that when I look back on this, my first Revive the YouTube channel video, it's going to be dreadful. It's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be awful. I'm just going to hate it. But if you don't do it, you don't do it. And it's only by doing anything that you get better at it. When I left Scotland in my very early 20s, I'd been living at home, so I didn't really have much call to cook or look after myself. And having gone to Saudi Arabia and found myself sharing a house with one other person, and neither of us having any particular interest or talent at cooking, the one thing that you do find out is that things on toast very quickly become tedious and you really need to be looking for something else. So, of course, I've burned steaks, I have wrecked pies, I have made soup that you could stand the spoon up in and walk away from it. But if you don't do that, you're not going to get any better. And I hope that by doing this YouTube channel, start up or revive up the way in which I'm doing it, I'll be able to look back on it in 4 weeks, 4 months, I don't know what it will take, and hopefully it'll be a little bit better. I'll start looking at the camera and not at one of the red lights. I'll spend less time gazing out of the window looking for memories. I'll stop moving my hands about. I'll stop scratching my ear. I'll stop losing my glasses. I'll maybe even stop having to read notes, although I think that's going to be pretty unlikely. But I think I'm going to quite enjoy this because I think I'm going to have to. It's not, as I say, going to be perfect, and I've already shifted the chair and the cushions and some of the things around and the lighting, and that may not be right yet. Maybe it's still wrong to have a black t-shirt on when you can't see much in the way of colour round about me. Maybe we need to change that as well. I don't know. By all means, write in, drop a comment, just say, you're sitting in the dark, we can't see you. Stop gazing out the window. Stop scratching your ear. Stop talking nonsense and tell us something constructive. I don't know. But, as I said, if I don't start, I'm not going to start. So, this is the start. Thank you for watching.